Hello and welcome back to another episode of Wild, Wise and Whole. Today I have this conversation. I have been so excited to release this for you all. These are the conversations that I geek out about and that just make me like I just love these types of conversations. So today I am joined by Erin Logan, also known as the.hum coaching, and Erin is a somatic relational healing coach. So we just got together and we just absolutely geeked out and had the conversation that is needed in the space around the female nervous system. We talk about how your menstrual cycle is in relationship with your nervous system and how each phase of your cycle impacts and is in relationship to your nervous system, and within that, to your body, to your sensations, your emotions, your trauma healing, all of those like amazing things that should be discussed when it comes to the somatic space. So I really hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as we absolutely adored recording it. Like, we could have honestly spoke for like 2 hours. So yes, and I hope you take away a lot from this episode. So enjoy, and thank you for joining and listening again. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Wild, Wise and Whole. Today I am joined by the lovely Erin, all the way from the US. So thank you so much for joining me in the podcast. This has been a conversation we have been trying to set up for a long time. So I'm so glad that we are finally getting a chance to just conversate and geek out about all things female nervous system, which I'm very excited for my listeners to hear. So tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Well, thank you so much, Lydia, for having me. And yeah, I was sharing before you pressed record, just how much I admire the way that you show up and have shown up. And, I've been following you for years, and I feel like we've kind of been in tandem with like this growth trajectory that we've been on. So I'm equally really excited and really grateful to have this conversation.
Thank
you. So I'm Erin. I'm originally from the US, but I'm actually based in Mexico City.
Okay.
So I've been in and out of Mexico for the past 12 years. It's really been like where I've spent the most of my post-college life. But I am a somatic practitioner, and my niche areas of focus are in somatic attachment therapy, so relational healing, looking at the way that we reflexively relate to ourselves first and foremost, and how that kind of ripples out into our relationships with everybody and everything. And my other kind of niche area is in female nervous system healing. So working with cyclical beings primarily, and, infusing the female physiology into the support that I provide.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. And I there might be some people listening to this going, female nervous system, because I think that's something that you don't see on social media, is this separation between the male and the female. And I know for me, like, my training has never mentioned the cyclical aspect of being a woman. And when I reflect back on that, I just think that is absolutely wild, how we can do these somatic trainings and we can do these modalities, and no one is talking about the fact that women's bodies change throughout the course of the month, and then how that impacts our nervous system. So I would love you to talk a little bit about that. Like, tell me from your perspective about the female nervous system.
Totally. Yeah, it can sound really nebulous. And I think for a long time I was learning and studying this work, and I was even, guiding clients through this work. I was able to apply it, but I wasn't even able to define it yet. It took a long time to really wrap my head around how to talk about it in a way that people will really get it without experiencing it. So I think when you experience it, it feels different. But essentially, female nervous system healing is nervous system healing that takes into account the female physiology, the female experience.
Mm-hmm.
The traditional somatic education that, most and also incredible people who are just incredible somatic practitioners and coaches, the kind of standard education that we're receiving is based on the male physiology, the male experience. And it's only been recently, within the past 3 to 5 years, that this research has really been coming out stating that, wait a minute, females have a completely different physiology. We have a different rhythm, a whole different rhythm outside of the circadian rhythm. We have the infradian rhythm, that monthly rhythm that we follow. And our nervous systems actually want to ebb and flow in tandem with our cycle.
Mm.
And so what we look at is, how can we best support and guide our cyclical clients through nervous system healing, taking into account where they are in their cycle, what's going on in their nervous system based on what inner season they're currently experiencing. Some inner seasons require more down regulation, more centering safety in the body, more stimulation of oxytocin, because of all of the things hormonally and physiologically that are happening. And other seasons, we have naturally more capacity in our nervous systems to kind of go right into more of the challenging material and without, being pushed out of our window of tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that provides, there's still some like jargony words in there, but I hope that, sheds a little bit of light on what it is.
I mean, and I really want to go into each season, like, just so the listeners are aware, like, we're just completely, like, intuitively having this conversation because we just both knew that we wanted to geek out about the female nervous system. So I'm happy that, like, that thread has come up, and I would love to go into the seasons. And I think one of the biggest things for me also as a practitioner has been listening to what you've just said, is the implementation of that with clients is like, sometimes they look at me and they're like, what? And I'm like, no, I know it's different. Like, I know that I'm telling you that we're not going to do deep processing in this phase and this phase, and then we're going to focus on this and this. And sometimes clients are like, oh, okay, but I see the look on their faces when they just feel like really seen. Because I think a lot of the women that, and we're going to go into the different phases, but a lot of the women that I work with, like, there's such differences depending on where they are in their cycle. And it's almost like you're working with like 4 different versions of a client sometimes, and it's wild. And then I have some clients who have like PMDD. There's one client in particular who I'm working with who has PMDD, and the work that we've had to do and be so like on it with tracking what's happening for her, so we can notice like what's helping her nervous system, what's helping these PMDD symptoms, like when she's in that week, what support does she need from me. And it's like, you have to be on the ball as a practitioner, I think, when you start to bring this lens into it, which I don't think is bad, but I think it takes a lot more intentionality and presence with your clients. And I think it takes away that like one size fits all working with clients, that you literally, and I know people do this in somatics anyway, but then when you bring the female nervous system into it, I think it's like you have to be so present with each individual client at each individual phase of their cycle and where they're up to. And like, that's a skill, right? Like, that's a skill to do as a practitioner.
Totally. It's such a skill, and it makes me feel like it's like almost a, another level of really intentionally like doing no harm, like as somatic practitioners, we just in general, I think, have a more gentle approach. We center resourcing so much more than, potentially other therapies or modalities. And so that's already there, right?
Yeah.
That intention to like really care for where your client is in that moment and not do something to take them outside of their tolerance, right? But when you're taking a female nervous system approach, you do have to show a lot more restraint sometimes, I feel, as a practitioner, to like, we could go there, but like we're not going to go so far because of where I know you are and what's happening for you. And what I've seen is that actually contributes to the progress that they make. Like holding something that my mentor says a lot is resourcing is also doing the work.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And that's something that like so many clients come in and they're struggling so much and they have this deep urge and desire to like do the really hard shadow, quote unquote, shadow work to, just stop suffering. And I think, we have to slow down to speed up. We have to center resourcing, center safety as much as possible, especially during those certain seasons, which actually, you see clients progress even quicker in my
Yeah.
experience. So
I think it really takes you being like anchored in your practice to be able to implement, and like who you are as a practitioner to be able to implement these things, because like you've just said, you do get people come in and I've been guilty of this in the past, of being like, right, what are we going to do? I'm going to jump into
totally.
it 2 feet first. And I think especially in somatics, it's like, and nervous system work, I see this with the girls in R&R, and like they have this misconception that they should see things change overnight. And I keep saying to them, slowly, slowly, it's the compound effect. Like you're almost showing up without a result for X amount of weeks when you do this work at first, because you don't see the subtleties changing underneath the surface, and people get impatient to that. So sometimes clients might go to me, I feel like I've done nothing. I'm like, trust me, in the world of somatics, you've done everything. And it might just be the fact that you've been able to notice one sensation in your body, and that might be really amazing for your body because it's showing that it's coming online, it's showing that the trust is building, like all of these different qualities in somatics. And I think it's so interesting how we ourselves, I personally find this, like I have to slow right down in order to mirror that with my clients. The minute I go and speed up, my clients feel that, and then the process can just go like, right, we're going to go hard and fast. So I think as a somatic practitioner as well, it really, you have to just like land in your body, and you have to like be okay with slowing everything right down. And that was something I found last year with my own nervous system, was in my personal but professional life, like I had to teach myself how to do that, because it's not easy to do that, especially if you're in your summer or your spring and your energy is high and you're like, yeah, let's go for it. And you really just have to like take a breath and intentionally slow everything down. And then I think like clients really attune to that and they follow you, right? Like they trust you to be in that slowness of the somatic process that's unfolding, and their nervous
Mm-hmm.
systems really tune into that.
Totally. What I like to tell clients is we have to slow down to speed up,
Yeah.
right? And one of the incredible things, like this thread that you see in so many people's stories, mine included, is once you start incorporating that somatic element, and I would love to know your experience with this too, in your own healing, how quickly you start to see progress. Like it feels like it's like such a slow burn for so long, and then like just all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I am like reacting or responding so differently than I would have, right? And it's totally a slow glow up, but when you really look like kind of in hindsight, people are making the progress in 5 years what they would make in 10 years, right?
Yeah.
With like talk therapy, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So when you really kind of like relatively look at how quickly you can make progress when you start to incorporate the somatic element, even though it feels so slow at first, you're actually making so much more change in such a smaller period of time for most people.
Yeah, I found that for sure. It's like you show up for your body and then one day she shows up for you and you're like, oh, yeah, I love that. And I think as well, just like last year was a testament to that, because there's two ways that you can look at it. Oh, it was a year, but actually the amount of patterns that I broke, the amount that I shifted, the nervous system healing work that I done, like I recovered from burnout in a matter of months. Like that's not something that you see a lot of people do, and it's because they're missing these qualities and these elements and these modalities that really allow your body to come into the picture. And I just think it's like profound that I experienced something traumatic like a year ago in January, and then I ended the year completely different. And I just say like it's a testament to this work, because yes, I showed up every other week. I was in therapy, I was doing all the things, somatic practices, body work, like really holding myself for the full year. But you can change so much on such a deep level. Like even my attachment patterns, I know you just spoke to that, but how I showed up in relationship and I attached to people around me, I was able to repattern that, and that is just phenomenal. I think that's just absolutely insane. So yes, I do think it seems slow at first, but then you like blink and you wake up one day and you're like, oh my god, everything feels so different, and it's such a deep, like, human felt. I don't know if you feel this, but like a feeling that you can't articulate into words, of just like you feel like yourself, you feel like you've stepped into a woman, you feel in your life, you feel in your body, you feel just so present, and it's phenomenal. And also I found then things that did come up that were stressful or triggering or difficult to be with, I had so much capacity to sit with that. I could just like be with that, and then the next day I'd wake up and I'd be okay again. And I'd just be okay in the darkness as much as I was in the light. And it's so profound.
And that's because of pleasure work,
Yeah.
right? Like we are only able to hold the darkness as much as we are able to hold the light. And for me, I like dove when I first started my somatic healing journey, I like dove real deep into the shadow.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what pleasure work was until I really started like studying, in more depth professionally. And I was like, oh wow, there was a totally missing component to the work that I was doing personally. And
Yeah.
once I started adding that myself, I was like, whoa, like there is a felt sense, like that feeling that you were talking about, this felt sense of like I've got me on a whole different level now than
Yeah.
before. So
I love the pleasure work and the joy work. Like I talk to clients so much about it. And like if they say to me, oh, I don't know where the joy is, I'm like, before we dive into any of that stuff, we need to focus on implementing joy into your life and pleasure into your life. And that's one of the reasons why, I'm edging more into holding space for female sexuality and doing the work around the body work around the pelvis this year, because female sexuality and our sexual energy is also so regulating for our nervous system. Like the two are coming together, because when we turn towards pleasure, it has such a regulating, profound impact on our nervous system. And I think we separate so much of these topics like sexuality or nervous system healing or trauma work or, attachment, and we make out like they're all separate. But one of the things I've realized in nervous system work is, while they're all so interlinked.
they're completely all in relationship.
Yeah.
Like we are relational beings, humans in general, right? We are everything internally and externally is relational,
Mm.
but women even more so.
Yeah.
And something that we get from actual like sexual pleasure work, like orgasm, cuddling,
Mm.
embodied touch, like everything that you can do in that regard, either to yourself, with yourself, or with a partner,
Mm.
induces oxytocin, which is the master nervous system regulator for women. And
Yeah.
so it's like, yeah, of course, of course we feel better. Of course we feel more regulated. Of course we feel more embodied and empowered when we, bring that element in. It's because it's really, the thing that is helping us feel better. Like that oxytocin is everything.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the things that I learned about the female nervous system, is we think it's dopamine, but it's actually oxytocin for women that is the biggest regulator for our nervous systems. So can you speak a little bit to that? Why is it oxytocin?
So yeah, definitely. Um, so women are inherently more relational. We heal in relationship with co-regulation, specifically with touch. And all of this is because, yeah, oxytocin is the nervous system regulating hormone for women. So we can look at this in from like various lenses.
Mm.
The even evolution of the nervous system itself started out in survival. It started out in dorsal with the freeze response. Slowly, the fight and flight response, that mobilization response, adapted through mammalian evolution, and the final kind of pathway that was adapted was the ventral vagal pathway, which is the safe and social connected branch of the nervous system. And it was formed through the mother baby dyad. So it literally was formed in the female nervous system. And
Mm.
so the
Okay.
actual ability to connect and the, feeling safe in connection started there. So that's one, kind of element to it. And then this other element is oxytocin, within the past like 3 to 5 years, this starting to be part of the conversation that our nervous systems don't regulate from reward in the
Mm.
way that men's do, right? With dopamine, dopamine strives for reward, whereas oxytocin strives for connection.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I hope that helps a little bit.
No, that
But
does. Yeah, I think because I also think that was like a big when I learned about that, that was like such a big piece of it almost made me switch a lot of my resources that I had where I think I would do things for that. I think when I was stuck in my sympathetic, those dopamine hits for sure, like really like felt good. I wouldn't say they regulated me because I was just stuck in sympathetic,
right.
like that fight or flight mood. But I think that my perspective and the thing that I chased was the dopamine hits, and that would then make me feel
Totally.
good. And then thinking about that as well from like my self-worth and my relationship with self, it was then those hits that I was getting would then mean something about me. And I think last year when I went on this journey with my nervous system, that switched, and it was things like cuddles with my cat or some self-soothing touch after the bath or taking my time to massage my body with oils and just like these really simple pleasures that I noticed made me feel so good. And then it almost like shifted that balance of that would be the thing that I wanted to include so much more of in my life rather than feeling like I needed to strive and do things and get those dopamine hits. But I feel for me that balance came because I went on that journey of like rebalancing and recalibrating my nervous system. And I think it's just something so important for women to understand is like we regulate from connection because so many of the clients that I work with are starved of connection. So then it's like, what is then happening to our nervous systems?
Think about it. I mean, I had the same experience, and what you find is that like you're first and foremost starved with connection with yourself,
Yeah.
right? And then once you start to, take those steps to reincorporate, some of those oxytocin stimulating activities like the self-touch, um, you know, cuddling, all of the things that you mentioned, um, I think it, and like really allowing yourself to feel it, like
Mm.
to experience the felt sense of pleasure, contentment, joy, comfort that you get from those things. That's the rewiring too within the nervous system. And you're like, oh, this is me connecting with me. This
Yeah.
is like me feeling me, right? And when we're feeling, the other kind of energies, it's more like, oh, this is me feeling a response in my
Mm.
nervous system. And you can start to kind of see um, holistically, you know, I feel like you start to understand yourself a lot better as
Yeah, for
well.
sure.
Yeah.
I think this is why it's like so. important, and I always say this to people, is like, when you're on this journey to start with, I think it's so important to have space held for you, to have somebody who can hold you in this, because this there's not only the piece around like, you know, going to a therapist or going to a somatic practitioner, but there's the piece around the co-regulation and the connection and having the space to land. And I think when you start out on your journey, or, you know, if you've experienced trauma, these simple things that we speak of now, I know that they're so difficult for people. The thought of self-touch for some people, even if it's just like stroking of the arms, is like way too much. But I think it's knowing that there's people out there who can support you and can assist you, and that will still be so important for your nervous system, and that will bring in this quality of connection that we speak about. And I think that's one of the things that one of the reasons why I always have space held for me, is because I feel like I land, like I get that feeling in my body where I just go like, oh, someone is seeing me, someone is holding me, I'm in connection with another human being who gets it. And that is just like worth its weight in gold, I think.
Especially for women.
Yeah.
Again, like I really feel like my female clients, and often, you know, when there's CPTS, when there's attachment wounding, especially when we've been really experienced a lot of rupture in relationship, it it can be so hard to find that connection within ourselves, right? We usually come in being like, I don't know who I am, I don't know, like help
Yeah.
me. And the relational like container with a practitioner and a client can be so incredibly healing for women, especially because it's that co-regulatory element, feeling seen, understood, feeling felt, right, by somebody else, by a safe other. Then it's also like, you know, for somebody who has attachment trauma, um, a lot of us just have a hard time landing in our bodies
Yeah.
without having that space guided or held for us. I even, you know, for a long time felt like I really couldn't experience that in my own solo practice to the extent that I could experience it with a practitioner. And there can be shame that comes along with that experience, but there's no need to feel shameful about it. It's natural. It's a beautifully protective response from your nervous system. And that's why these kinds of containers exist. So
I just love it. I think we're really fortunate to just like do it.
I know. It's so magical and so beautiful, and you know, it's just this never-ending evolution, right? It's like it's just this thread that you get to keep following, and yeah.
Yeah, it's so nice. I want to talk a little bit about the inner seasons and just explain this for people, because I think also like this is something that blew my mind when I learned about this, because I was experiencing what we're going to go into, and I'll share a little bit in a second. And then I was like, what is going on? And then I learned about this, and I was like, I was so proud of like myself. So towards the back end of the year, maybe like October time, I noticed that when I was in my inner autumn and my bleed, I would feel like I would just feel this energy. And I messaged my friend and I was like, I don't know what it is, but I feel like I could take on the world. And usually for me in my bleed, I'm like super tired, I'm like super inward. And I was like, okay, this is interesting, because I've noticed this like the last two bleeds. So this was a couple of months after coming out of burnout. And then I learned about the nervous system in relation with your menstrual cycle, and how when your hormones drop, the natural kind of rhythm of your nervous system will come in to energize you. And I was like, oh my God, everything is starting to like be connected and fall into place in my body. And that was like such a profound moment for me to feel that in my own body, and know that my nervous system and my menstrual cycle were coming into relationship with each other. So I'd love to talk about this, because when I talk about this story, clients are fascinated by it, women are fascinated by it, and it's something that is a big piece in the work that I do now, and how I try to, and you were saying before as well, of how we try to show up and do the work with clients depending on where they're up to. So let's start with, should we start with inner winter?
Sure.
Because we are in
Yeah.
winter in the UK. So you just kind of speak to, I'm going to leave it there and I'm going to let you share your lovely wisdom on all of this.
Yeah, so inner winter is our menstrual phase, is our bleed. Starts with day 1 of our cycle. And, these seasons also apply to the wider life feminine transition. So other transitions or experiences that can fall under inner winter are menopause, first trimester of pregnancy, and early postpartum as well. So if that's something that's really important to share, I feel, because this conversation doesn't only apply to people who are bleeding. It applies to all women, right? And so what's happening in your nervous system during inner winter, during your bleed, is going to mirror what's also happening in your nervous system in those other transitions, those other initiations. So in terms of the physiology of it, we have a heightened sympathetic response occurring in our nervous system during our inner winter. Within the first 3 days or so of our bleed, for like an average 28-day cycle, basically all of our hormones plummet. Yeah. So your progesterone, your estrogen, your dopamine, and your serotonin all totally plummet within the first 3 days. So if you think about it, we have basically no hormonal scaffolding, right? Like we are lacking that internal hormonal support. And essentially there's a part of our brain that can interocept all of the changes that are happening as threat, right? And so this mobilization response, this like, hey, respond to this threat that's happening, starts to kick in. And so what we want to do to kind of balance that experience during our inner winter and support our nervous systems is down-regulate as much as possible. So we want to bring in the parasympathetic response to balance out the sympathetic activation that's occurring during that season. So this looks like centering safety, resourcing as much as possible, resensualizing as much as possible, which is literally as easy as, pausing and taking a look around to the room that you're in and taking in the colors and the shapes and the textures and the movement and the stillness and, re-enlivening your senses, your body, coming into safety, coming into presence, right? There are plenty of other ways to access resource as well, but, just to name one. And then also oxytocin. So stimulating oxytocin as much as possible to help regulate our nervous systems during this inner season where we're needing a lot more of that support.
Yeah, I think as well it's from like a breathwork perspective, some really nice gentle breathing can be really good, getting into the body, kind of making that breath quite low and quite slow is something that is really good for down regulating, and also not getting swept up in that sympathetic drive. So I teach this in art, and art is like your sympathetic is your mobilizing, but it's commonly referred to on Instagram as your fight or flight. So if people are listening to this and they don't know what the sympathetic is, that's how people can a lot of the time in content refer to it. But I don't like to do that, and I know you won't like to do that, because it gives almost like that state a negative connotation and can make people feel like they always need to come out of, regulate themselves out of that sensation and that state in your nervous system. That state is so crucial. No state is wrong in your nervous system. It's just that when that kicks in, actually what's happening in that phase of your bleed requires a little bit more stillness, a little bit more introspection, like you've said, because you don't have the same capacity. So if you get carried away with that, you can fall into that trap of getting a little bit like burnt out or feeling a little bit like ungrounded as you transition into your inner spring. I'm right in saying that? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
Okay.
our capacity is naturally, because of all of this hormonal and physiological change that's happening within our first, within our bleed, our capacity is naturally at its lowest,
Yeah.
which means that we simply just have less tolerance, right? And in order to be able to, you know, face internal and external challenges, we just need to bring in a little bit more of that support. And we can
Yeah.
do that through down regulating.
Yeah. And this as well, when we think about therapy and we think about trauma resolution work, this is a time where ideally you shouldn't be going into the big kind of heavy shadow work because, like we've touched on, you don't have the capacity. So I always say to people who there's one client in particular I'm thinking of in the R&R, and she actually took this to a therapist and said, I know I don't have the capacity in my nervous system and I've learned about this, so can we not go into the deep kind of trauma work when I'm in my bleed? And I was like, that is why we teach this work, so it ripples out further into these therapies. And other practitioners and other therapists are aware of this stuff and how important it is. So if you are listening to this and you're doing the work with a coach, a therapist, you're on your own journey, it's like, limit the amount of deep processing that you do in this phase, just because you don't have the capacity to hold it, and then it can take you out of your tolerance, like we've said, and then that can cause some like distress for your nervous system, which is not what we want to happen.
Yeah, it is like one of the most healing things that we can do
Yeah.
is kind of resource and center safety as much as possible during that
Yeah.
season.
So when we transition into inner spring.
Yeah, so inner spring is like a liminal phase, right? It's like a between phase kind of, where our those more supportive hormones are starting to come back online. We definitely don't have, we're not peaking in terms of our capacity or that internal support. So what I really like to, but you can start to feel the uptick of that
Yeah,
energy
you can.
coming back in, like that actual life force energy, which is different than mobilization,
Yeah.
right? It feels different. Um, and so we're starting to kind of have more capacity in our nervous systems just naturally to be able to respond to internal and external challenges, and remain embodied
Mm.
in the face of those. Um, what I really like to focus on with Inner Spring is titration.
Mm.
So, titrating as much as possible, we are able to go into a little bit more of that, more challenging material. But we really want to honor that we aren't at our complete peak
Mm.
quite yet.
Yeah.
So, in titration, if for people who might not know what that is essentially when we kind of slowly integrate, um, you know, kind of dip a toe into the challenging material, and then come back to safety in the body, go into the challenging material, come back into safety. So it's more of like a pendulating. We're not like remaining for long periods of time
Mm.
in that more challenging space.
Yeah. And I think that's like such a crucial element of any therapy really, or coaching, is like being able to bring those qualities in. And I think, linking it back to what we said at the beginning, it's like you have to be so in tune and present with your clients to notice like what feels like it's taken them over the edge, and then you bring back to resource and safety, because I feel like it's so easy, and I feel like the sexy part of healing is to stay in the vortex of the stuff, and like keep going and stay in it. And so I think there's something really compassionate and really loving about bringing qualities like titration and pendulation into the work that we do. And I think it's such a lovely way to just allow your body to like get used to what it's been holding on to, and for you to get used to that as well before you like completely smash yourself in the face with it, because that's not safe for your nervous system. And I also think there's like this misconception that trauma work and healing work should be like intense and it's going to completely like derail your whole life. And it's like, no, when it's done safe, like, don't get me wrong, there's periods where things feel like they're falling apart. That's natural as like you change and evolve as a person, but it shouldn't completely derail you if it's done safely, because you should do it in a way where like your nervous system has capacity to be able to hold that.
Totally. And, the goal is, again, not to fix, right? Or change, but to honor exactly where we're at and learn how to create more capacity to be with all expressions of us. Like you were saying before, no response is bad, but
Yeah.
it's the way that we relate to those responses that make them bad, right? And that's why this is all so connected. That relational piece is like this underlying thread, right,
Mm.
throughout this whole thing. And I feel like cyclical embodiment is like you taking your own hand and being like, I care so deeply, so deeply and so holistically about myself
Mm.
that these are certain changes that I'm going to bring in so
Mm.
that I can feel as good as possible all the time.
Yeah, I love that. And I think as well it requires us as practitioners knowing that we're not there to save people. And I feel like when you do this work, there's an element like you want to help people, but there's an element thinking about that, how you show up in relationship again, and like attachment with this. I think there's a part of us that you want to save someone from your suffering, or when you first start out, and you have to like learn the same way you're telling clients that it's not about fixing anything that's wrong with them. It's like, as us as practitioners, it's about knowing that, okay, I'm not here to save a client from what they're experiencing. And I think just even that shift and being really aware of that and staying connected to your body when you're holding space for people and like what you're noticing is so important, because if you are in that savior energy, that's where you can push someone too far, because you want to get rid of or you want to fix what's happening for them. And that's where you kind of lose the element of the somatic and the real like presence and connection and just walking side by side with a client. So there's so many things that are kind of happening from a body-based level in space when you're working with somebody that is just like so crucial to the journey for the client, but also you as the practitioner as well.
And so this is why it's so important for us space holders to be doing our own work. It's
Sure.
so crucial. And, the more I heal my personal CPTS and attachment wounding, the less I show up like that with my clients, right? I think, and it's an evolution, but it's, if we can, yeah, stay in our bodies and be like, if, if I know that I've got this, I know that you've got this. Like, we don't have to, there's nothing that we need to fix here.
Yeah.
But it's a journey. And I think you know, hopefully the idea is that we continue to expand within that as
Yeah.
practitioners, the longer we do it and the more we invest in our own work.
Yeah. So tell me about inner summer. This is the peak.
Yeah,
This is the
this
good
is the
time for trauma
key.
processing your inner summer.
Yeah, yeah. So inner summer, our ovulation phase, this is where our hormones, those supportive hormones, are peaking. Estrogen, especially dopamine and serotonin. Um, and you know, if inner winter is like the peak contraction of that kind of ebb and flow, inner summer is the peak expansion. We naturally have more access to the ventral vagal, the safe and social branch of the nervous system. So we are, you know, all signs are pointing towards procreation. We're feeling more magnetic, we're feeling more energized, we simply feel safer in connection with others during this phase. And all of this is kind of pointing to just us having more nervous system capacity, more life force energy. And, whether or not you want to have babies in this lifetime, the health of, one of the health markers for women is our ovulation. And so it's, considered one of our vital signs. Whether or not we are ovulating is incredibly important to our overall health and well-being. Whether or not we actually want to conceive. So that's also something really important to name. What happens is if we have, if we are revved up all the time, living in one of the F responses, if we're experiencing chronic dysregulation in our nervous system, either like fight, flight, or freeze all the time, our bodies are being flooded with adrenaline and cortisol, which are hormones that are going to be competing with our ovulatory hormones. And so this is how looking at the health of our ovulation will actually kind of be a window into how much chronic dysregulation we're living with.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And I think as well, it's like from the perspective of the energy in summer, I know it's like counterintuitive, but I find just like moments of not even rest. I wouldn't call it rest in my summer because I feel like I have the energy to be able to go. But I think just finding the moments to like take a breath and get some stillness, because I feel like that inner summer the wave is so amazing. But like if you keep running with that, there's like the element to feel a little bit like not burnt out, but a little bit like, tired. And then you can almost crash into your inner autumn, which is when we started down again with our hormones. We kind of like fall off the ledge. So I think inner summer is like such an amazing time in our cycle, but I also feel like we take so much on in that phase, and then we naturally start to move down, don't we? So it's like I think there's like a real balance to like somatically being embodied in that season. Like it's amazing, but I personally find I don't like my inner summer and my inner spring anymore. Not so much my inner spring, but I don't like my inner summer. I used to love inner summer, and now I don't.
I definitely have a more of an appreciation for the other seasons that I didn't have. I think I definitely was like, ovulation, yes, like let's go, and now I'm like, now that I know how to support myself in the other phases, especially inner winter and inner fall, I can have a deeper appreciation for the richness that can come in those phases. But yeah, I mean, inner summer has its own gifts for sure. And I think a challenge there can also be like run until you burn yourself out or do. And I think it just goes back to listening to your body, listening to your capacity. And in general, if we're carrying like more trauma energy that's undigested in our bodies, our capacity is going to be smaller. It's not, and the more we heal that, the more like it kind of starts to come from life force energy, and you can really feel the difference between.
Oh, you can so feel the difference. Like when you activate that life force energy, it's like it's mega.
You have like a next level experience of life force energy with your Shakti experience.
Yes, the Kundalini awakening.
I can't speak to, but and I would love to hear more about that. But
yeah, that was mega. That was like that was like a whole different. I've still not really worked with that at all, because it was just so like it burnt me out, to be honest, when it happened. But I remember like being in burnout for the first like 7 months of last year, and I had no energy whatsoever. And then I remember when I started to come out the other side of that, and that natural energy was there. Oh my God, just to wake up and not feel tired. Like I was so grateful. Like I think a couple of times like it made me emotional and I cried, because to feel that fatigue and to be burnt out and to feel like you're so ill and nothing is working is like, it's a horrible feeling. To be ill in your body is like, it's so uncomfortable. And to be tired all the time, like out of all the symptoms I experienced last year, it was the tiredness and the fatigue. And I would just call my friends and cry, and I would just be like, I can't do anything. I feel like I just need to go to bed and I need to sleep. But obviously I have bills to pay. I'm a single woman. I've got things to do. I've got a business. So it's so hard. So when that started to come back around and I'm like, oh, I only need like one, or I only want one cup of coffee today. I don't need like five to get through the day. And to just like sleep well and wake up feeling energized and to be able to have energy to go to dance class. Like it's so wild. And then when the Kundalini come, I was like, I was so burnt out because it just took me way out of my capacity. And there's nothing you can do about it because it just awakens. So you just have to be with it. And before Christmas, I went for a bodywork massage and I said, like, I'm avoiding it because I'm so burnt out from it. But I'm sure it'll be amazing when I tap into it for sure.
Well, and what a beautiful response to have,
Yeah.
right? You're like, I know this is going to overwhelm me right
Yeah.
now. I'm actually going to auto regulate. I'm going to just consciously make the decision to put it aside. It's not even avoiding it, it's a form of regulation, right? Like self
Mhm.
regulating to be like, okay, not right now. I'll
Yeah.
get to you when I have the capacity. And I
Mm.
imagine that experience is going to be one that you're integrating for a long time. Like, how intense. I've heard about that happening to people. And I have to say, I'm like terrified of that happening to
I
me.
didn't even know what was happening. I didn't even know what the hell was happening. And it all come on the back of like, so I just got home from running the retreat as well. And I went for a massage on the Monday. And I was just like, because the other thing with nervous system work is like, and I think especially as space holders and just women in general, like we become so open to energy. I don't know if you feel this, but like when
Totally.
being chronically dysregulated, I didn't feel energy. So I would work with clients, I would do trauma work, and I'd be like, like yeah, like I'd just gone for a cup of coffee. And one of my friends, she's done all of my events with me, and she's like very sensitive to energy. She does Reiki, and she used to always say to me, "How the fuck do you do that? Like, how do you not take anything on?" And I was like, "I don't know." And I've worked with like in the prison system, I've worked in probation. The job that I was just doing recently was like around trauma with kiddies, and it was all this like intense work, and I never felt it. And last year I realised, oh, you wasn't feeling it because you were shut off from your body. It's not like a badge of honour of like, oh, I can do this work and, I'm used to it. And I'm like, oh, okay, so now I'm really starting to feel energy. And oh my God, that in itself for my nervous system, I'm like, humans are energetic beings. And to feel your own energy and to feel the energy of other human beings is like powerful, so powerful. And it's making me definitely show up as a different practitioner. It's definitely changing who I am as a woman. But like, even that to get your head round is like, it's almost like you defrost.
Oh my
Like,
God. That's what it is. It's like I tell clients this all the time that this work is like a slow melting.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a defrosting. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's lovely. I mean, I love it, but I just need the space to like be with it, I think, and understand what it is because when it come on in that massage, like it was so scary because also I took some stuff on that wasn't mine. So like from that retreat I was doing breath work, and because I was so open and I was in the room with all of these women, it's the first time I've ever worked with a client and I felt something in my body and immediately I was like, that's not mine. And I was behind a client and I was like, I know that that's not mine. And even that unsettled me because I was like, I've never experienced that before. And then I went for a massage and then just it completely blew open. And then 2 days later it happened again. And I was like, and you make noises, like you have these visions, like it's like you convulse. I was like crying on the bed with Larry and I was like, what's going on? I'm scared. And she just really held me. So thank God I have like really amazing
Yeah.
practitioners around me. And I got the vision of the snake and I was like, oh, okay, like it's the Kundalini. Okay, she's here.
That is so insane.
It
That's
was intense.
wild.
Yeah, it was wild.
I saw a clairvoyant. This is an aside, but I saw a clairvoyant this year who's really well known in the States. She's like a 2,000 person wait list. I've waited for my appointment for a year. And it was one of the most like unbelievable experiences I've ever had. I'm not like someone who goes to clairvoyance, but she tapped into her clairvoyant nature because she had a Kundalini awakening like 20 years ago. Yeah. And so I'll send you her podcasts. She's done a
Yes.
few and they're like incredible. You might like
Yeah.
to hear
Yeah, I
them.
love
But
that. Yeah, that's
anyway,
good. I know I'm trying not to like because when I googled it, it was like your Kundalini makes your life fall apart, and it's like
right.
dark and it's so heavy. And I just messaged Matt and I was like, Matt, I think I've just had a Kundalini awakening, and I'm terrified that my life is about to fall apart again. And he
Yeah.
messaged me and he was like, don't read stuff online. He was like, just practice what you do, be with your body, get to know this energy, and she will guide you to where you need to be guided. And I'm like, okay,
That's
it's
beautiful.
trust, isn't it? It's like whatever we experience in our body. So we have to have this element of trust. And I think even as practitioners, as we peel these layers back and we get more attuned to ourselves and we experience these different things, it keeps coming back to like self-trust, and it keeps coming back to just being with yourself without like judgment.
Yeah, that self-trust, that relating to self. How am I going to relate to this experience that I'm having? And that like space, like this is me, this is my experience. What am I going to do here? You
Yeah.
know? And like I think before we go through this work, it's like I'm going to react, I'm going to put up a defense, I'm going to any of my attachment styles towards myself, like
Yeah.
that'll engage. And then it becomes, okay, I have this space. How do I want to relate to this? Do I want to be a loving inner parent, that wise adult me, non-judgmentally holding space for this experience I'm having? And I think that changes everything, essentially.
For
Yeah.
sure. I think you touched on something really nice then about, and sometimes I say this to my clients, is like sometimes choosing to not be in like the sensation or the experience is like that I named it as avoidance, but then when you mirrored that back to me, I was like, oh yeah, actually it wasn't avoidance, it was just me being able to go like, right now I don't have the capacity for that. And I think sometimes as well in somatic work and in nervous system work, we can put such a focus on inward, feel the sensation, be with it, all of these different things. And one of the things I've realized from clients and also my own work is like you can still do this work and resource and like come out of what you're experiencing, and it doesn't mean that you're avoiding it. It just means you're choosing something that's a better option for your nervous system, and that is going to have a regulating effect. There's a difference between doing that and avoiding your shit and what is happening for you, for sure. So I like that you said, you mirrored that back to me actually, because I was like, oh yeah, I did not have the capacity, and I was like, no thank you,
Yeah,
not
you
now.
were giving yourself a gift. Yeah, of course. You were like, I know my nervous system.
Yeah.
Not right now.
Come back soon, just not
Yeah.
now. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that is like, it's that it's the autonomy, isn't it? And it's being able to speak up for yourself and being able to know yourself well enough to be like, okay, right now this feels like too much, or coming into my body, if you're being guided through something, actually that sensation feels too much for me. Let me focus on my external environment and take some deep breaths. Like that's going to be the better
Exactly.
option for your nervous system, rather than forcing yourself to sit with something, thinking about that hard and fast, that sexy healing that we see online of, do the thing and sit in it. It's like, well, actually, that's probably going to have a dysregulating effect on your nervous system, which I wouldn't
Yeah,
recommend.
totally. It's like, how can I best care for myself right now? And some of the time, it's not going to look like I'm going to just sit with this stuff. And even though I truly don't think I have the capacity for it. And I think that comes back to, just the beauty and the gift of agency, and
Yes.
choice, which so many of us, when we go through attachment wounding or other types of trauma, we lose that, right? We lose our sense of agency and we feel as though we don't have any choice. And that's just one way to start kind of practicing that empowered choice, that agency.
Yeah, I love that. And then going into inner autumn, which is the last
Yes.
one, where we start to fall. And I think this is really interesting about like progesterone meeting our needs of this period, and how that then has an impact in the next cycle that we go into. So I'm gonna let you speak about inner autumn.
Yeah. I think inner autumn can be really mystifying. I don't know if you had that experience, but for me, for so long, I was like, what the hell is this like luteal phase? It's so uncomfortable. I don't understand what's happening in my body. I think so many of us women can be quite confused during this phase until we like really start to embody it and educate ourselves on the beauty that we could experience. Um, and it is with that increase in progesterone, right? Progesterone is a neurosteroid. And so it actually does naturally have calming effects on our system. The issue is that, again, like I said, I think it was in the ovulatory phase when we were talking about inner summer, that if we are flooded with these other hormones like adrenaline and cortisol living in chronic dysregulation, our progesterone production is not maintained. And so we have lower levels of progesterone, which means that, this hormone that is meant to help us, feel calmer, feel safer, uh, amidst this falling off the edge, like you were saying, or falling off the cliff during this phase, if that's not there, it can be really dysregulating.
Yeah.
And so we do have this, increase in sympathetic charge. It's not peaking like it is during inner winter, but it's coming back up. And again, during this phase, we really want to downregulate, bring in the parasympathetic resource, safety practices, pleasure practices, oxytocin, in order to, keep that progesterone level as high as we can. Especially, if we're on a conception journey, we want really high levels of progesterone to kind of protect us during that first trimester. If we are bleeding, we want as high levels of progesterone as possible because it helps thin our uterine lining as well. And so we have less cramping, we have less heavy bleeding. It can just be a more pleasant experience in general. So, this is where it becomes a really holistic journey, which is the more we embody each phase and listen to our bodies, bring in that nervous system support, do nervous system healing work in general to come out of that chronic dysregulation as much as possible. That symbiotic relationship between our nervous system and our endocrine system, it's just so overall healing, right? We're healing trauma in our nervous system. We're healing our cycles. We're no longer having challenging symptoms, PMDD, problems with conceiving, challenges in perimenopause, menopause. I mean, it ripples out.
Yeah, for sure. It's so big. And this is one of the things, I don't know if you can speak to this, but one of the things that or the clients I'm working with PMDD, that we're tracking is we're bringing this nervous system piece in. And obviously we can't monitor it in terms of like actual levels, but seeing if we can do a lot of down regulating and soothing and safety work in the month. So in autumn, like just before she transitions into it, but that week, what we're trying to see is if she can manage doing some like down regulating work, and if that then impacts because of their hormone levels, impacts the next in autumn that she's having and these symptoms of PMDD. And so far it seems to be working, which is crazy. So like when I first started working with her, and I know she won't mind me speaking about this, but we had a session and it was really, really bad, her symptoms. And it's ever since then, because that was when I saw it, because I didn't know about it up until that point. And ever since then, we've been super, super intentional with trying to bring this nervous system piece into it. And I've never seen her that bad again, and she's not being that bad again. So she still feels the spikes, and she still feels, as she describes it, like that drag when she goes into it in the autumn when the hormone changes. But it's not pulled her down anywhere near like what it has. And honestly, sometimes she comes into session and I'm like, wow, like, and she's been to doctors, she's begged the doctor to send her for support. She's been referred to as a gynae, and she's like, how is that going to help me? Like, there's something more going on in my body here, and like no one is helping me. And it seems like this work is the first time like we've been able to really honor what's going on in her body, and also like shame the symptoms of PMDD or not hide those symptoms and not hide who she shows up as that week, because that's a part of it. And even that's been so liberating for it, is to be like, okay, this is a part of me and this is something that happens to me, and like I'm not going to shame it and I'm going to bring it into space. And it's been so healing. Isn't that wild that you can reduce symptoms of PMDD? Like, that's mad.
I have so much that I could say based on what that client experience, and like the
Wow.
incredible work that you're, you know, navigating her through. And I've seen it as well with clients. I had PMDD myself. I don't know
Oh,
if you have
really?
ever had that experience. Yeah, but I tried everything. I tried cycle syncing, diet changes, exercise, all of this stuff, nothing helped. Um, and I see it in with clients all the time that their symptoms start to reduce, especially during that luteal phase. Our luteal phase is considered like the report card of our cycle, right? So like every luteal phase, we can kind of check in and be like, the previous month, like how much did I honor my
Yeah.
cycle? And it'll kind of give us, a good indication. But also, you talk about shame and how much shame we can feel, especially as women, um, around, the our cyclical nature, the way that we, like you mentioned before, can kind of show up as four different women, right? Because neurochemically, we literally are throughout
Yeah.
the month, and kind of relieving ourselves of that, of the shame that can come in, can be so healing for PMDD as well. Shame is an inner winter experience. It's a, physiologically, um, but I think what's so beautiful about healing shame in the nervous system is how much we end up stepping into our healthy aggression and our expression of anger. And that is such a beautiful luteal phase, you know, energy, because it's in that phase where we start to be like, no. And
Mm.
that like urge to put up those boundaries kind of naturally starts to come in. But so many of us don't follow it because we're taught that we're not allowed to or we're not supposed to.
Yeah,
And
for
so
sure.
using the energy of the luteal phase to do that, shame work and healing that response can be incredible.
Yeah, because shame is so dysregulating as an emotion anyway, isn't it? So it's just like
Incredibly.
shame being stored in the body, or when a human being feels shame, it's naturally going to dysregulate you. So if you're holding that in terms of parts of self and experience, you're stuck in this dysregulating loop almost. So to bring it in heals, like you said, and then we can then step into like healthy aggression, which again is another massive sign that your nervous system is healing. If you're somebody who's stuck in freeze or you're stuck in fawn and then you're able to access healthy sympathetic, huge indicator that the work is working. But then also it takes away that charge. And I say this in retreats that I do and work that I do with women, is like when we bring these topics into space, we dissipate that charge that we feel around it, which is not going to keep the nervous system stuck in wanting to hide, in wanting to dysregulate, in wanting to run away, and wanting to shut down. Like, you get to step into connection with a part of yourself that maybe has been uncomfortable for you to always do, and be seen in that and held in that. And that's so healing on so many different ways, but like especially for your nervous system and especially for trauma work as well. I just think as women, like, our natural default settings is shame.
It is. And that's, I mean, it makes sense because we're inherently so relational.
Yeah, and we're
Of
so shame.
course, shame is going to be an experience that we experience, so much more than men, because belonging is, and that social connection is inherently, like, for our survival and our biology, so much more important. And so shame, the healthy expression of it is like to keep us with the tribe, to keep us with the group, to not get us exiled. But what we're usually all living with is chronic shame, and that's when we want to, really do some healing work around it.
Yeah, and it's a big piece of work to do, but it's very liberating and it's very very empowering, which I love. Um, I've loved this conversation. I think it's been amazing.
Me
I feel like
too.
I could get you on like a million times over.
I would love that. I would love that. I would be honored. I know. I feel like we could just keep I knew this would happen, honestly.
I know, honestly, I'd be uploading like a 2 hour podcast episode and it's just
Yeah.
like talking about all of these different layers, but I've loved it. And I love that there's women that I can have these conversations with. Like it's so nourishing for me and it's so nourishing, I hope, for the community who are listening. And I really like, my intention was to bring these types of conversations into the forefront so women can understand their bodies and understand their nervous systems and then advocate for themselves in therapy or healing or any of that stuff. So thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else you would like to add or say before we go, before you tell people where to find you?
Anything else? I mean, I think, we covered so much.
Yeah, we did.
But yeah, just thank you so much for having me on and for, having this podcast, this space for women to come and co-regulate and,
Yeah.
feel seen, feel less alone in their experiences. And yeah, it's really beautiful what you're doing.
Thank you. Oh, one of the last things I want to ask, I need to get in the habit of asking people this. What does it mean for you to be wild, wise, and whole?
Oh, God. It's a big question.
Big question, you can break it down.
Um, I think it means in essence not self-abandoning.
Nice.
And I think I was listening to your podcast about kind of reintroducing this new rebrand, and I loved how you broke all of them down, and I love the women who run with the wolves
Yeah.
and how much that's influenced. I love that book as well, and I think it's just like through my healing journey, I think the biggest kind of what I learned is how much I was self-abandoning to
Yeah.
get what
Me
I
too.
needed, and how much through this process I've committed to no longer doing that. And I think my whole kind of healing journey is centered around how I can show up the most lovingly towards myself. And that can look in all different ways. But I think that right now, at least, if you ask me, would be, um, yeah, just committing to showing up for myself and no longer abandoning me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It made me think of a quote I put up on my little Sunday service quotes that I do, and it's something along the lines of like, find a place to scream so that young girls and women a few generations down the line know that their voice wasn't silenced, something like that. And that, yeah, it's so powerful. And I remember I saw that quote and I was like, wow. And when you talked about not self-abandon, and then it made me think of that as like really being in the power for self and showing up in that. And like
You know
that's,
how so many of us practitioners, us young practitioners who are dedicated to this work, we were those girls.
yeah,
Like
we were.
we were the girls who couldn't scream. We were the girls who couldn't use their voices. And we get to not be that anymore. And that does have a generational impact that is incredible. So yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And how can people find you and how can they work with you?
So you can find me through my website. It's the.humcoaching.com. Um, and my Instagram is the.hum with two M's, HUMM. And I am open for one-on-one clients right now, as well as really excitingly enrolling the first cohort ever of my signature digital program. So it's called Inner Temple, and it's a 3-month somatic education journey for women, packed with experiential and traditional learning, all about forming a secure attachment and relationship with ourselves through emotional healing, cycle healing, and also how to form a secure relationship with others that we are in relationship with. So, really kind of bringing in all of the areas of somatic attachment and female nervous system healing that I work within. Um, it's a 3-month program. It's mostly self-paced. We have 3 live group integration sessions in each month of the program. We have one in each month of the program. Unbelievable bonus content.
Love that.
My mentors are teaching in the integration sessions, and for the first cohort ever, I really want to share this with your audience. It's only $333 US, and
Mm,
I'm keeping it at an incredibly low price to
that's
honor that
insane
this is the
value.
first cohort. Yeah, and
Love that.
so I'm really excited. And yeah, I would love to welcome as many women in, especially at this really affordable price as possible. So you can find more information about that on my website. And yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much for
much,
being here
Lydia.
with this episode. It was a pleasure.
You are you are so lovely, and
Thank
yeah,
you.
I'm so glad that we got to finally connect like this. So thank you
Yeah,
so
me
much.
too.
I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right.